What if Earth lost its atmosphere? Imagine waking up one morning, opening your window, and finding nothing outside. No wind, no clouds, no birdsong, just a pitch-black sky and an eerie, absolute silence. That's the moment Earth loses its atmosphere, and the moment everything we know about life begins to unravel. Sounds like science fiction? But what would really happen if the air around us, the thin, fragile layer that keeps us alive, suddenly vanished? It's not just about not being able to breathe. Losing the atmosphere means losing pressure, oxygen, warmth, and protection from deadly cosmic radiation. Within seconds, Earth would no longer be a planet of life, but a frozen, lifeless rock like the moon. And in that scenario, humanity wouldn't get a second chance. Let's break it down, second by second, and see what would happen if Earth lost its atmosphere. Start with something simple. Breathing, something you do thousands of times a day without even thinking. But to breathe, you need something we take for granted: the atmosphere. Earth's atmosphere is a mix of gases, mainly nitrogen, 78%, oxygen, 21%, and trace amounts of carbon dioxide, water vapor, and others. It's the giant oxygen tank your lungs rely on. If it disappeared instantly, you'd feel it, literally. You'd experience a complete vacuum, no pressure, no air to inhale. You'd try to take a breath, but there'd be nothing to breathe. Oxygen levels in your blood would plummet. Within 10 to 15 seconds, your brain would start shutting down, much like what happens to pilots during rapid decompression at high altitudes. Unless someone rushed you into a pressurized, oxygen-rich environment, you'd be unconscious and dead within 2 to 3 minutes. But there's something even more terrifying. Air isn't just for breathing. It also presses against your body, keeping it in balance. Without that pressure, the air inside your lungs would rapidly expand. If you reflexively held your breath, which most people would, your lungs could rupture, causing internal damage and an even quicker death. This isn't just theoretical. Astronauts are trained never to hold their breath in the event of pressure loss in space. Doing so is basically a death sentence. And here's the kicker: no emergency gear could save you if you were outside when the atmosphere vanished. Oxygen masks, tanks, none of it works without pressure to force air into your lungs. In that moment, your entire respiratory system would shut down. You'd be a living being stranded in a world that no longer supports life. A world with no air is a world with no refuge. No matter who you are or where you live, you'd meet the same fate. Silently suffocating as Earth's atmosphere fades into nothingness. Some imagine humans would explode like balloons in this scenario, but reality is far more horrifying in a medical and physical sense than in a cinematic one. The atmosphere doesn't just give us air, it holds everything in equilibrium. On Earth, atmospheric pressure is around 101,325 pascals, or 1 atm. That's just enough to keep your bodily fluids stable. Take it away, and that balance collapses instantly. The pressure difference would make the water in your tissues start turning to gas, especially in areas exposed to the environment. Your eyes, mouth, tongue, skin, fluids like saliva and tears would begin to boil, not because of heat, but because the external pressure has dropped to near zero. You'd swell up as your soft tissues expanded. You'd feel bloated. Your vision would blur as fluid boiled in your eyes. Your mouth would dry out. Your tongue would feel like it was on fire. But contrary to Hollywood depictions, you wouldn't explode. Why? Because your body is elastic. Your skin and muscles are strong enough to keep you together, even while expanding. Oddly enough, your blood wouldn't boil, at least not right away. That's because it's sealed in your circulatory system, still under internal pressure from your beating heart. As long as your blood vessels remain intact and your heart keeps pumping, your blood stays liquid for a few precious seconds. Still, irreversible damage is happening. Capillaries begin to rupture, brain and lung tissue degrade without oxygen and pressure, leading to unconsciousness and death in under a minute. In short, you wouldn't explode, but you'd be dying in one of the most terrifying ways imaginable. Not from fire, not from cold, but from the loss of something invisible you've never even thought about: atmospheric pressure. And once that invisible force is gone, no matter how strong your body is, it simply can't survive. If Earth suddenly lost its atmosphere, it wouldn't just mean we couldn't breathe. It would mean our entire planet would be laid bare to one of the most powerful and merciless forces in the solar system, the sun itself. Under normal conditions, the atmosphere acts like a giant shield, blocking most of the sun's harmful radiation. The ozone layer filters out nearly all of the most dangerous ultraviolet rays, UVC. It also scatters, absorbs, and reflects X-rays, gamma rays, and high-energy particles from solar wind. That's why you can step outside on a sunny day and worry about sunburn not being cooked alive in seconds. But if the atmosphere were to vanish, all of those protective layers would disappear with it. If you happened to be on the daytime side of Earth, sunlight would hit you with full, unfiltered intensity. No more scattering, no more absorption. UV rays, X-rays, and gamma rays would pass straight through your skin, your eyes, and into your cells. You'd suffer severe sunburn in seconds, along with deep tissue damage and permanent eye injury. Skin cells would be scorched, and your DNA would start breaking down rapidly, like being trapped inside a giant microwave oven with no off switch. Worse still, X-rays and gamma rays don't just burn, they're highly carcinogenic. They can damage your immune system, mutate your genes, and trigger cancer. Even astronauts aboard the ISS, which orbits hundreds of kilometers above Earth, still rely on pressure-controlled environments and radiation shielding. Without an atmosphere, Earth would become one giant radiation chamber. Think the night side would be safer? Not exactly. Without the atmosphere to retain heat, the surface temperature would plunge to nearly that of outer space, around 270 degrees, 454 degrees. Within minutes, water, moisture, and any organic material would freeze solid. Air also regulates Earth's temperature. It absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night. Without it, Earth would become a planet of extremes, one half scorched by radiation, the other frozen solid. Just like the moon, where the temperature difference between day and night can exceed 300 degrees, over 570 degrees. In short, no atmosphere means no life. Not just because we'd run out of oxygen, but because nothing would stand between us and the harsh, unforgiving universe. Earth, once a thriving blue planet, would become a dead world, silent, frozen, and bathed in deadly radiation. If the atmosphere vanished, Earth wouldn't just be dangerous, it would cease to be a life-supporting planet. Air is the foundation of stability. It moderates temperature, maintains pressure, allows water to remain liquid, and shields us from lethal solar radiation. Without all of that, our home would be transformed forever. Let's start with water, the most essential element for life. Without atmospheric pressure, water in lakes, rivers, and oceans would begin to evaporate, not because of heat, but because of pressure loss. This process, known as vacuum boiling, causes water to turn to vapor even at low temperatures. That vapor would then drift off into space, like wisps of smoke fading into nothing. However, without the atmosphere to hold in heat, the dark side of the planet would quickly become so cold that all that vapor would freeze again, forming a thin layer of ice over the surface. Oceans, the very cradle of life, would become silent, frozen plains, buried beneath hundreds of meters of solid ice. Air also traps and distributes heat around the globe. Without it, temperature swings between day and night would become so extreme, no life form could adapt. Plants would wither and die without water or CO2 for photosynthesis. Animals would perish, either from suffocation, freezing, or being incinerated by solar radiation. Within hours, food chains would collapse. Ecosystems, from tropical rainforests to coral reefs, would crumble completely. Microorganisms, the very foundation of life, wouldn't survive without liquid water or pressure. From tiny insects to elephants, from humans to deep-sea creatures, life would vanish, and Earth, once the blue jewel of the solar system, would become a lifeless, frozen rock, drifting silently through space. From afar, it might still shimmer with icy blue reflections, But beneath that frozen shell lies only the absolute silence of death. When we think about the atmosphere, we often only think of breathing, but few realize it also plays a critical role in keeping space technology functioning. If that thin veil of air were to disappear, it wouldn't just mean the collapse of ecosystems. It would spell the collapse of modern technological civilization. One by one, satellites would begin to fall from the sky. Normally, satellites orbit Earth at various altitudes, from low Earth orbit, LEO, to medium, MEO, and geostationary orbit, GEO. Even at high altitudes, they still experience a slight drag from the uppermost layers of the atmosphere. That tiny resistance is actually essential. It helps keep satellites in stable orbits, prevents collisions, and regulates velocity. If the atmosphere vanished, that drag would vanish too. You might think no air means satellites could fly more easily, right? Not quite. Most satellites, especially those in low orbit, are designed with atmospheric drag in mind. Without it, the balance between gravity and orbital velocity would shift, causing many satellites to spiral out of control and eventually fall toward Earth. And when they fall, make no mistake, it won't be a gentle descent. Satellites would fall freely at speeds of tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, burning up as they enter any remaining atmosphere or crashing directly to the Earth if they aren't destroyed on impact. The result would be a massive firestorm. Thousands of fiery metal fragments plummeting from the sky, resembling small meteors, capable of destroying entire cities if they hit at the right angle and speed. But the dangers aren't just physical. The collapse of satellites would also mean that all systems dependent on them, navigation, communication, the internet, television, weather monitoring, and defense, would cease to function in a matter of hours. GPS would stop working. Radio signals would be cut off. Space stations like the ISS would lose control, becoming drifting hazards in space. In other words, the disappearance of the atmosphere wouldn't just bring biological destruction. It would erase all the technological pillars humanity has built over the last century. Earth would revert to a pre-industrial state, but not by reversing time. Rather, it would be a violent fall from the sky. We live in a world that's wirelessly connected, where information, location, data, and images travel through the air in the blink of an eye. Yet few realize that it's the atmosphere, an invisible layer surrounding us, that acts as the highway for these signals to travel. The atmosphere isn't just the air we breathe, it's also the physical environment for radio waves to propagate. The ionosphere, a layer within the atmosphere, reflects low-frequency radio waves, allowing them to travel thousands of kilometers, even bending around Earth's curvature. This is why you can listen to AM radio from another state or receive television signals despite your antenna being outdoors. The troposphere and stratosphere, the layers closest to the ground, help slow down, direct, and reduce interference in GPS, satellite television, mobile phones, aviation radar, and satellite internet. They absorb some of the radiations that cause interference, creating a stable environment that prevents signals from breaking up. When the atmosphere disappears, all of these mechanisms would vanish. Radio waves would no longer reflect, instead shooting directly into space. GPS signals would no longer adjust for deviations, leading to errors of hundreds of meters, rendering the global positioning system useless. Phone signals, television broadcasts, and satellite internet would no longer reach the ground accurately, as there would be no intermediary to manage scattering. Aviation radar, which depends on reflected signals from airplanes or flying objects, would lose its effectiveness. Without an atmospheric layer to bounce back signals, radars would become nearly blind. The result? Airplanes, if they could even fly under these conditions, would be flying blind in the darkness of technological failure. Underground fiber optic networks might last for a short time, but they would quickly become fragmented and useless without satellites to coordinate, sync, and relay information. Satellite television, global telecommunications, military communications, mobile internet, All would fall silent, as if Earth were cut off from all sound. No waves, no connection, no connection, no information, no information, no modern world. Air is something we breathe every day, something that surrounds every living creature, slipping through every branch, every stream, every breath. Yet it's because of its continuous, invisible presence that we forget. It is the foundation of all life. Imagine a giant clock representing human civilization. Each gear is a system: ecology, technology, healthcare, energy, transportation, education. All of them working in sync, connected, interdependent. But if you take away the atmosphere, just a thin layer of air less than 100 kilometers thick surrounding Earth, the entire clock would stop. Not slow down, it would stop completely. In just a few seconds after the air disappears, people would lose consciousness, then die from suffocation. The lack of pressure would cause the body to boil from the inside. The sun would scorch everything on the daytime side, while the night side would freeze near 270 degrees C. Water would evaporate from the oceans, then freeze. All life would be wiped out. Satellites would fall, radio waves would stop, the internet would vanish. All modern technology would become useless. And in the end, Earth would become a dead planet. There would be no one left to tell the story. No systems to record it. No hope left. Only a barren, cold, silent planet spinning around the sun like a wrecked ship lost in the vast ocean of space. All of this because of one thing: air, something we often take for granted. So, remember this. Every time you take a deep breath, every time the wind blows across your face, every time you see a cloud drift across the sky, it's not just ordinary, it's a miracle. It's the one chance Earth has given us. If we lose the atmosphere, we wouldn't need war, pandemics, or asteroids to end the world. Just 1 second without air would be enough to write the final chapter for all of humanity.